What makes a character relatable? Does your character still fight when the odds are insurmountable? And is it enough to find joy in the struggle? Hello, friends. Welcome to Characters Without Stories, a TTRPG podcast about the roads not yet traveled. I'm Star. This episode, I'm joined by Owen Kerr, a writer, teacher, indie game designer, voice actor, professional game master, TikTok enthusiast, LGBTQ plus father, husband, and ally. He was recently certified as a therapeutic game master and will run or play in just about any TTRPG you'd like. Welcome to the show, Owen.
Oh, well, hey, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. No further questions.
Sounds like you have a lot of hats.
I guess I've got to buy a rack now. That's when you put it all in a pile like that. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to this.
Awesome. So you are bringing a character for a game called Dark Heresy.
Correct.
I am not familiar with that game. Do you want to tell me a little bit about it?
Sure. Dark Heresy is a role-playing game set in the universe of Warhammer 40K, Warhammer 40,000. In it, the players take on the roles of very, very minor actors for the Inquisition. You're all acolytes. Read expendable. So it's very shades of gray. It's very grim dark. Your people send you out to fight worse things than you for the betterment of humankind. I like some of the 40K fluff, the non-racist stuff specifically.
I am not familiar with the Warhammer lore or really anything about it. Just not something I've ever had a chance to explore.
Well, it makes sense when you figure it started out as a fantasy war game, tabletop miniatures, and then somebody said, hey, let's put orcs in space. And so they built that castle in the cloud and then had to build a huge foundation up underneath it. The lore for 40K, it dwarfs some like real world libraries. There's just way too much for a human mind to comprehend. So if you can imagine a shared universe built by dozens, if not hundreds of writers, creators, game designers, all trying to be cool and edgy simultaneously.
It sounds like you like these kind of underdog stories. It sounds like the way you talk about Dark Heresy is that you're not super soldiers being sent out against monsters that are a little bit beyond your skill level.
That's true. I think in my background's in theater, and perfect characters are horribly boring. A perfect character is completely unrelatable to a human being. There's nothing relatable to them. I was talking about it with my father one time, and he said, I didn't like that book. I said, why not? He says, because the character was so fabulously rich that literally nothing was beyond his scope. So he's not a big fan of the Tony Starks or the Bruce Waynes of the world, because if you can just throw more money at the problem. And when you have a character that's good at what they do, but has some deep-seated character flaws, there's an inherent tragedy to that. And you can either overcome your flaws or you can lean into them. And either way is narratively interesting. The other half is like improv. And so always make the more interesting choice. And then what did the other writers say? Somebody asked him, how do you get the audience to like a character? He says, oh, it's real easy. I make them generally likable a little bit, and then I chase him up a tree and throw rocks at him, adversity.
I am with your dad on Bruce Wayne and Iron Man. I feel like if you have that much money, why don't you just throw it at the social problems that are causing these
Exactly.
supervillains?
Exactly. Somebody pointed that out on one of the boards. It's like, what was Dr. Freeze trying to do? He's trying to do cryonics to save his wife. Oh, what was this Scarecrow trying to do? He was trying to work up new psychological treatments for his patients. He's like, how many Batman villains would be solved by like a nameless grant from the Wayne Foundation? Oh no, that's a good idea. Why don't you go over and do that? Here's $1 billion. Get back to me when you're done.
Right.
Too busy filling out paperwork to be a supervillain.
Instead, we get cool car.
Exactly.
So who are you bringing to the table today?
Today we have, it might be a little bit of a departure. He's one of my NPCs. His name is Asher Novaak, and he is an ally, handler, and throne agent. The hierarchy in the game is there's the big inquisitor who is there's dozens of them, and they're stamping out heresy and demonic influences all around a truly massive scope. The conceit is humanity has basically taken over the Milky Way with all the governance issues that entails. So they need lieutenants, and they're called throne agents. And the throne agents are usually the ones that the PCs deal with, giving assignments, giving rewards, meting out punishments, etc. So Asher Novaak is a throne agent.
So tell me a little bit about Asher. For example, how old is he?
Probably late 40s, early 50s. He is compact, below average height. He's wiry, and he's pleasant and urbane, and he terribly rarely raises his voice. But the entire energy he gives off is of an efficient predator. He's always very polite, and that could be, here's your new assignment, acolytes, or, calming a psychotic psyker, one of the rogue telepaths that's, you're supposed to bring in, or executing an enemy of the state. He's always just very even keel and can be quite charming. But again, he's like the epitome of, yes, I taught you everything you know. I have not, however, taught you everything I know.
So you are a voice actor. Do you have a voice for this character?
Ooh, I hadn't thought about that. One of his other things is he speaks multiple languages fluently, but he has no accent. Nothing that you could pin down, oh, you're from this planet, you're from this region. And in my theatrical training, one of the first things we did was hammer out your regionalisms. Good evening, acolytes. Please have a seat. Your briefing materials are in front of you. Please take a look at them at your convenience, and any questions that may arise, please make them known to me. He would be good reading bedtime stories. He would be good. You'd go and watch him at, the kiddie time. Come and bring your kid to the library and have somebody read to them.
The words that you chose to demonstrate his voice are not particularly warm and fuzzy. There's something
No.
kind of standoffish and professional about it.
Yes, because he has a secret.
Ooh, do tell.
So my original concept was there's one of the inquisitors, and inquisitors have so many enemies. So it would make sense to cultivate a professional sense of paranoia about everything. You never know who you can trust. Even your compatriots could be working against you if your agenda is even slightly different than theirs. So I came up with the character of Rhadamanthus Lehrer. And Rhadamanthus Lehrer is an inquisitor who is, again, just rabidly paranoid about any interaction. He only does dealings through throne agents, intermediaries. You get a voice recording that's obviously been processed through several different computer algorithms so that it's just a voice. It's not recognizable. And so I wanted Asher to be one of his trusted lieutenants. And then I thought, what's the easiest way to hide something is in plain sight. So actually, our good friend Asher is Rhadamanthus Lehrer. He acts as inquisitor to his other agents, but he is Asher Novaak because he likes to keep his fingers in a few special pies, and player characters are going to be one of those groups. So he's an enigma wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a riddle. So his biggest secret is that he's not really who he is.
So you are talking about an inquisitor, and to me, an inquisitor, I think Catholic Church. What is an inquisitor in this game in Dark Heresy?
The hierarchy in Dark Heresy is there is the Emperor, and the Emperor has been on his throne for about 30,000 years, might even be dead, we don't know. And his direct servants are the Inquisition. The Inquisition is outside of every legal structure. They are the law. They can command at a word. I need your entire battle fleet around Canopus 4 ASAP. They can casually order the extermination of a planet. They wield incalculable power, and the only checks and balances they have are each other. for better or for worse. Some of them pursue darker studies, using the enemy's methods against the enemy. There's a faction, they are dedicated to adversity makes people stronger, so we should probably make life as hard on everybody as possible so that the cream rises to the top. So again, not good people at all. Very, very, very shades of gray, tending toward black in some cases. And that's another one. I'm a huge fan of the misguided good. I don't like mustache twirling villains. I like somebody who's really trying to do a good thing and using horribly, horribly questionable methods to do it. The Thanoses of the universe. Somebody said, hey, why didn't Thanos just snap his fingers and multiply the resources in the universe by 10 times? That would have done it too. I'm like, yeah, right. Yeah, it really would have. We all build shrines to him. Oh, Thanos, you rule, But misguided good is so much more interesting because you can relate. You can go, I do not agree with your methodology at all, but I kind of get why you're doing it. You have a soul in there somewhere, and it's a little tarnished, but you're trying.
I think that it complicates the relationship between the player characters and the BBEG. So instead of just taking a kill 'em all approach, you have to question that kind of decision. And then you get a nice moral quandary for your characters. I think moral quandaries are so much fun.
They are. Throwing a moral quandary where when it's at best, it's a bad option or a worse option, and you get to decide which is which. Yeah, it makes for some fascinating gameplay.
What does it mean to be an inquisitor? Is there kind of a class system, or?
The character types are pretty cut and dried. You've got the melee fighter, the distance fighter. You've got the thiefy assassin type. You've got the thinker. They have a very technologically encapsulated society where only certain people understand technology. So you could be like a tech priest. You could be a professional data gatherer, a researcher, and a sage. But any one of those, it's kind of like pre-law. Any one of those could become an inquisitor, which is fun because you can make up an inquisitor or a throne agent who used to be an assassin, and this one used to be a bureaucrat, and this one used to be a priest, and this one used to be a cop. Very different feel. Rhadamanthus, aka Asher, has got tons and tons and tons of skills and talents. He's great with weapons. He's great with distance and blade. All the languages. He's got a really high charisma fellowship score, really high intelligence. Not the strongest person in the world, but above average skills, toughness, agility, willpower. Very, very intellectually curious, again, because the more he knows, the better decisions he can make. He's got his fingers in so many pies as far as factions. There's a triple handful of factions in the game, everybody from the military to the Adeptus Mechanicus, underworld, nobility, all different groups. Indomitable will, true grit, total recall, command, air of authority, ambidextrous. So I don't like the term Mary Sue because I think it's demeaning and sexist. But then when you realize that Dante did self-insert fiction, it's like, yeah, and then I went to hell with the coolest guy ever who said I was the coolest guy ever, and all of my enemies were like burning. Yeah, it was kind of cool. It's like, yeah, it's self-insert fiction.
Going into morals a little bit, the Inquisition, like I said, I associate it with the Catholic Church. Is this a religious institution?
Yes, officially. Again, misguided good. The emperor, when he took power, he's like, I'm not a god. I'm not anything special. I'm just trying to unify humanity in the face of these horrible, horrible, horrible adversaries, of which there are a double handful. And that lasted about long enough for him to be ensconced in his cyber throne before religion started springing up about him. So the ecclesiarchy, the church of the emperor, is another major, major, major player. So the Inquisition is kind of stacked on top of that. Some of the inquisitors are quite religious and fervent in their belief in the emperor as a god. Some of them are not. Honestly, I think the original designers tapped into the whole rule of cool with the Inquisition, the guys in the funny hats with flamethrowers and massive amounts of power. And honestly, I don't lean into the religious aspect of it. Again, if a player was like, "Oh, I'm going to be really religious," and really, okay, that's fine, and we could explore that. But again, it's fascinating to me that the subject of the religion said, "Please don't do this." Okay. And of course, the first thing, it's very human. The first thing everybody did was, "Oh, what did he say? He's not the Messiah. Only the Messiah would say he's not the Messiah. Oh, what kind of chance does that give me?" For it being far future aliens and blasters and flamethrowers and demons, it's got a very human thread through the whole thing. We're just perverse.
Is Asher religious?
Not at all. Not at all. I see Asher as one of these people who there's a certain personality that says there's something that needs to happen. You see this in organizations all the time. Somebody's like, "Hey, we really need to work on the cleanup after our events." And they're looking around and they go, "There's nobody really taking charge of this. Hey, I'll volunteer. I'll be in charge of cleanup after events." And of course, they're very, "Oh, no, that's very nice of you," right? And there's a kind of a superiority to it because maybe there's a trust issue. They don't trust anybody else to do the thing as well as they could. But there's also some competence to it because they'll do some things and see some positive results, which is positive feedback on maybe I should be in charge of this other stuff, especially if you see somebody incompetent trying and failing. And you're like, "Hey, let me just take that off your plate, buddy." Rhadamanthus/Asher rose up in the ranks just by being ruthlessly competent. When things are really, really big and bad, and you can put yourself to bed at night going, "This horrible thing could have happened and I prevented it and I can sleep well at night," kind of a thing. But it is, again, he's kind of self-appointed, but he's got a lot of data to back it up.
What are the ends that Rhadamanthus/Asher are trying to accomplish?
Are you familiar with the concept of rat killing? This is one of my mom's favorite phrases. I was like, "What are you doing, Mom?" She's like, "I'm doing some rat killing." Rat killing includes dishes, laundry, feed the dog, car maintenance, anything. I finally figured out that rat killing meant something that you got to do today, that if you don't do it today, it'll be worse tomorrow. But even if you do it today, you're probably going to have to do it tomorrow too. Just maintenance. Again, if you let it get away from you, bad things are going to happen. So in a universe where literally the tagline of 40K is in the far future, there is only war. So when you're dealing with millions or billions of planets with millions of billions of inhabitants each, trying to stave off the incursions from literally every direction, inside and out. Inquisition also has to deal with things like rebellion and heresy, etc., etc. So when literally, every hand is raised against you, the rat killing is just try to keep a lid on it one more day. Try to keep it from just all going to hell for one more day, one more minute, one more week. Carve out a moment of grace in there. So there really is there's an ultimate end, the extermination of all non-human life in the galaxy, unfortunately. Very, very, very xenophobic. But even then, there would still be problems with, rebellious planets and people going down dark paths and using magic and summoning demons. And there's no end to that. The only thing you can do is get your broom and try to hold back the tide. Again, pretty grim, dark. It's actually got kind of a Lovecraftian vibe to it. You're fighting these, massive and monstrous entities forever and ever and ever, and you can't hope to win, but you can put up a good fight.
In the TTRPG space, a couple of things come up for me, one of which is I think everybody wants to be the rebellion and not the people in power. And I also think people who play TTRPGs often, well, and just in stories in general, you want to have kind of that big showdown that solves the problem. You don't write stories about the people who are sweeping the floors and you know what I mean? How does that work within the context of crafting a story?
Episodically, a new situation arises that has to be dealt with. You know, the old starfish story, right? The kid's out on the beach and he keeps bending down and throwing something out to sea and bending down and throwing something out to sea. And the old lady says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "These starfish all got washed up on the beach and the sun's going to get hot and they'll die. And so I'm throwing them back into the water." And she's looking up and down, 10 miles of beach. And she says, "Why? You'd spend all day and you're not going to make a difference." And he picks up one and he goes, "I made a difference on this one," and throws it out to sea. So again, maybe it's a reskin of reality. Sometimes we can't make a difference universally, but we can make a difference for the people around us. We can make a difference for a stranger whose day we brightened. My other background is education. In 12 years of teaching, I know that I helped out a student. I know that I was there for them when they really needed it. I know that I gave a student a tool that they took and later went on and did something with. I just don't know which ones they are. So in the microcosm of, I can't save the world, but I can save my corner of it. I can't save the world, but I can save my family. I can't save the world, but I can save my best friend. I can't kill all the zombies, but I can keep them away from the house for another day or week or month. And again, if you want to get real deep, we're all fighting against forces that we will not inevitably be able to succeed against. There's a writer by the name of Stephen Jenkinson who talks about, he was in hospice care for decades, and he says, when death comes, and it will, you can fight it. And the Bible is full of stories about people wrestling angels. Well, when you wrestle an angel, you're not going to win. You can tire yourself out mightily, but you're not going to win. But sometimes the point is to wrestle with the angel and maybe earn your own respect and maybe earn the respect of the angel, even if the results are inevitable. It's just a matter of time. So maybe the point is the little victories. Our lives have got little defeats and little victories, just as humans. And so we should celebrate every little victory. Oh my gosh. Wresting something against entropy and making a bright spot or a beautiful thing. We should celebrate that. Because, again, I'm a storyteller, and we're the only species we know that tells stories, and we tell stories to understand ourselves, to understand our surroundings, to understand other people. And if the understanding is you don't have to win, but that doesn't mean that the fight isn't a good fight.
That makes me think of political activism because often, as a leftist, you're up against some very powerful forces, but that there is joy even in the struggle. I think when we're talking about telling stories about these kind of day-to-day battles, yeah, I think that there are probably people who are like, this is too small or this is not doing enough in the world. And so it's a really interesting approach to me to tell those kind of smaller stories. And it sounds kind of like a little bit of a survival context within the game.
Yes, part of the lore is you're fighting against forces you can't imagine. And when you die, because you're going to die, there might be, a nice line written about you, served admirably and well, posthumous medals, et cetera, But most of the time, no one's ever going to know your name. And most of the rank and file are going to be afraid of you because you have way, 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 way too much power to wield and can use it, and some have use it indiscriminately. And how power doesn't corrupt, but it does attract the corruptible. So there's an aspect of the story is we're all stronger together than we are separately. There's an aspect of the good guys might not be that good, but that doesn't mean you don't get to be a good person. I hadn't thought of the political structure of that, but yeah. And it's interesting that you mention it. Nobody plays the Empire in Star Wars games because, again, they're one of these, we'll just throw, 100,000 troops at it. They've got all the cards. And again, the rebel nature of it is we know that that's us. We know that we've got forces arrayed against us, the 0.000001%, who we literally, I mean, they're dragons, they're Cthulhu. You know, they're inevitable, they're out there, and they're changing things, and we don't have any massive impact by ourselves. And the group nature of most RPGs is you're good at this, you're good at that, I'm bad at this, but we're going to work really, really well together to achieve our goals. Gosh, I hadn't even thought of using it as like leftist propaganda, but you know, it's all there. It's not that every government is bad, but they are the government. And if they ever get away from us, if they ever stop being for the people, by the people, and of the people, then we're going to have problems. We already do when we're sliding from oligarchy to kleptocracy, and those people have their hands in each other's pockets so deep they can't pick a third. If you're aware at all, you're aware of that dynamic. Let me throw something else out here. When I got certified as a therapeutic game master, Dr. Anthony Bean, Geek Therapeutics, look him up, he's amazing. One of the things they pointed out is the part of your brain that feels emotion does not consider a source. So you read the book and the thing happens and you cry, and you watch the movie and the thing happens and you cry, and you step on your dog's foot and she goes, and you cry. The emotion part of your brain just knows you're sad. Thinking part doesn't consult. So one of the big deals about running role-playing games as part of therapy is you can put characters in situations, and of course we pack bond with everything. You can put their character in a situation where they can practice a skill set or, use a psychological tool that they've been given by their counselor and get practice at it. So if Ragnar the Barbarian gets pissed that the Archmage threw a drink in his face, he's got to work on his, anger management. Oh, the Archmage isn't a bad guy. I don't know what's going on in his head, and everybody's the hero in their own story. Count to five. It's 5 years from now, it's not going to matter. Your brain can't tell that was a practice run. Your brain can't tell that the emotions you're feeling and sublimating and dealing with in the moment, they can't tell. So you're getting practice at that. Best story on that I heard was the 7th graders. The skill set was self-advocacy. And they go out and they do all the things and they save the princess and they get the sword and they come back and the Baron's like, oh, I'm so terribly impressed with you. I'm so impressed, I'm going to give you a boon. What do you want? And they're like, oh no, self-advocacy. But they got practice in a safe environment. So maybe some of this is practice for, we've got to think community. We've got to think outside our tribalisms. We've got to think outside our mundane existence. We've got to realize that there are far more people in our boat than there are in the dragon's boat. And that it's like Chesterton said, fairy tales don't tell children that dragons exist, that monsters exist. Children already know that. Fairy tales present the possibility of a dragon slayer. They say that dragons can be defeated. If we're creating stories where people are facing literally insurmountable odds, but we can carve out one little space, one little haven, safe places for other people to show up and make more safe spaces until the sea nibbling away at the shore forever and ever and ever until we have sand instead of cliff. Maybe that's the story. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe we can defeat the dragon. Somebody pointed that out with the Hunger Games and the Divergent and all that. They said we're feeding our children stories about how small groups of dedicated people, young people, can change the world in a positive way. More of that, please. Let's get that in their heads and give them some heroes to look at. And at the same time, the psychology says the more you read, the more you interact with characters that aren't like you, your empathy levels get higher. The scenario in my head is little Timmy is reading this LGBTQ, and little Timmy is cis and straight. And Mark in the story is falling in love with Larry. And Mark's like, oh, Mark looked over at Larry and his heart went pit-a-pat. And little Timmy goes, oh, I was at the dance the other day and I saw Marcia and my heart went pit-a-pat. And he's like, oh, and then his hands got clammy and he felt like he was sweating and he felt stupid. Gosh, every word that came out of his mouth was just dumb. He's like, oh my gosh, I felt that too. Oh, love is love. Oh yeah, that's exactly what that feels like. Oh, but he's gay. Doesn't matter. Oh, he's trans. Doesn't matter. Love is love is love is love is love. And if you hit that concept about 6 or 7 times, it's like, hey, wait, maybe people are people. People get mad and people get hurt. People fall in love and people have joy, and it all feels like that. Wow. Talk about subversive. Don't read that book. Burn that book. Why? Because they ain't people. Who are they? Doesn't matter. Anybody ain't us. Okay, no, you can go away, Timothy. People are people are people are people.
You mentioned that the Empire is xenophobic, and there's a lot of people who don't want to play in a game that has things like xenophobia in it. And so I'm curious why you made that choice, why you chose to play a game where xenophobia is kind of central. And how do you play a game like that and make it safe to your players?
Lots of different ways. First of all, since the Inquisition is not monolithic, that you do have, and it's funny because you can set the bigger bads that way. So they've got the factions that are extremely, this is the way it is, and humanity predominant, blah, blah, blah. And then you have the radicals, and the radicals keep that a secret from the other inquisitors. And so the radicals who use all sorts of things, they don't have any problem dealing with the various alien species. They don't have any problem with pursuing quote unquote questionable methods. So invariably, all of the people in the direct chain of command of the party are radicals. They agree, yes, humanity needs to survive, but kind of like Catholicism. I don't know if you know a lot of Catholics.
I went to Catholic school.
Oh, you're Catholic?
I'm not Catholic.
Every Catholic says this. It's like, oh, I'm Catholic, but I don't believe everything they believe. Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. I don't believe everything they believe. There's a wide variety of things to choose from. I think women should be priests. Oh, okay, cool. I think it's okay to be gay. Oh, okay, cool. I think fill in the blank. So again, when you come at it from that angle, when you start the party out in this, well, these are the rules. And then your throne agent says, we need you to do this thing. Sir, we're going to be dealing with aliens. Yeah. Shh, shh, shh. Oh, okay. So officially, everybody, not us, is bad, but, some are not bad as others. And then, of course, in the supremely powerful organization, there are people that we are fighting against there. I find it laughably simple to set it up where the power is being used against itself. Imagine if there was a Cold War between Jeffrey Bezos and Elon Musk. Officially, they're, hugging each other and giving each other back rubs. And unofficially, they're undermining each other at every opportunity with plausible deniability. And then that gets interesting, because when you're a cog in the machine, but you are working against the real evils, when you bump into the Eldar, which are space elves, basically, you bump into the Eldar and they're fleeing horrible persecutions and death. You're like, well, they're not bad folks. They're just surviving. And then the other inquisitor gets up on his hind legs and says, oh, anybody who's not right-handed and blue-eyed, like, wonder who that could be an analog for. And then you're fighting against him while you're working with the elves, the Eldar. It starts to make sense. Now that you make me look at it, the more there is the microcosm of humanity. We know that there are people out there who are racist and sexist and phobic and phobic and phobic and phobic, and they're the bad guys because they lack empathy. We know there are places out in the world where it's not safe to be a woman, not safe to be XYZ, but we can be that. We can champion that. We can stand up. We can be allies for that. We can make the right choice. We can make the good choice. We can make the moral choice. We can make the empathetic choice, even to our own detriment. How many stories are there out there of somebody who stood up and said, no, do whatever you want to me, but this is wrong, and I'm going to keep saying it until you stop me. So the inherent heroism of that. To answer your question, TLDR, I make it so that even if the official word coming down from on high is do horrible, heinous, lack of empathy things, you get to make choices. And I try to make it pretty obvious that you can make better choices. And of course, players are going to do weird things anyway. Players are going to try things anyway. One of my favorite stories is I had a homeschooling group and the big boss fight was coming up. And the BBEG lurches to his feet and drags himself toward the party. And the one kid said, "Oh, he's hurt." He says, "I've got a healing potion." "What?" I've got a healing potion. Can I give him the healing potion and maybe he'll stop doing bad things?" "Roll." And of course, that's when he knocked it out of the park with a high charisma roll. And so he gave the ogre the healing potion, and the ogre drank it. "Oh, hey, full motion. Ooh, my leg." And stopped being, the bad guy. The denouement was eventually the ogre went to work for the sewer patrols down in the Undercity, making sure worse things didn't come up. Of course, my wife, junior high teacher, she's listening to these kids and she's crying, and she's like, "Oh no, nonviolent solutions and outside of the box thinking. And oh gosh, I'm just so proud." 3 sessions later, the same kid threw a guy off a 12-story building. So, baby steps. It's great when those moments of grace sneak up on you, and when they do something, when your players do something that is just, I had no idea you were going to do that. And that's so there's so much wonder to that, even on my side. The little choices that aren't really little choices, the little actions that send just ripples through the universe.
Yeah. Is Asher a good person?
That's a really good question. He's trying to be. He's one of these greater good people. And, if it's the choice between I've got to bomb a planet back into prebiotic conditions or let a demonic incursion eat the souls of 10 billion people, he knows which way he's going to go. That's not really a question. I play him. Boy, there's a lot of me in there. I'm really big about second chances and maybe even third chances, because there have been times in my life personally where I got a second chance that I probably didn't deserve and was able to take the higher road the second time through, having seen the other route. Asher's Rhadamanthus, he's had chances that he didn't deserve and is determined to make those worthwhile. And so if the party is doing anything questionable, he's going to rein them in real hard. So he's trying to be a good person. He's trying to fight the good fight. He's very intelligent, but he's also worried that he doesn't have enough information to make the best choices. But again, if it comes down to it, he's going to make a call and he's going to live with the call based on the best information I had at the time. This is the way we went. Now, again, going back to the demonic incursion, if he can send in a few teams and stomp the cultists flat and burn down the dark church and et cetera, make it so it never, ever could happen, that would be optimal. If it gets away from him, he can't let it get that much worse. And again, he's got the power to do something about it, at least in his little corner of the galaxy.
So you said that there's some of you in this character, maybe a subconscious choice, not a conscious choice. Is that something that happens a lot when you're building characters, where you're bringing something of yourself into it?
Yeah, every character. Because, again, background in theater, one of the things that we said is you can't lie on stage. If you're lying, everybody knows it. You've got to find the reality of the character within you. I can tap into that, which again is probably why the misguided good is so easy for me, because it's just like, okay, if I believed the way this character believed, if I believed that, then everything else follows. If I'm Thanos and I believe the ultimate greater good is to eliminate half of sentient life, if I believe that, then he's sympathetic, he's understandable, he sacrifices his daughter. I've got a kiddo. Nothing. I'm sorry, there is nothing that would make me sacrifice my kiddo for any reason. And the whole thing about the good guy will sacrifice you to save the world, the bad guy will let the world burn to save somebody he loves. So if you can get inside the head of the character and find the relatable part, the part that's true, the part that's human, the part that's honest, and even if you step back and say, I don't agree with what you're doing, as long as you can understand why they're doing it. The characteristics of myself that most often pop up in my characters are, most of my life I had secrets. I try not to have any anymore because my memory isn't that good. So it's interesting to me when a character has a secret. And so those are leavened in, sometimes good secrets, sometimes bad secrets, sometimes misguided secrets. So if a character has got a secret that they're really trying not to show anybody, I can relate to that. If I went back and took every character I've ever written for a story or every character I've ever created for a game, and that number's, if they all showed up at once, I wouldn't be able to feed them. But if you looked for a through line in there, you could probably do a pretty good psychological composite sketch of me based on what they did and what they avoided doing, even in like video games. I think anybody who says that there isn't a lot of them in any character that they make, I think they're lying to themselves. Back in the day when I was doing D&D, I would usually play fighters and mages and thieves and fighter mage thieves and mage thieves and whatnot. The smart guy with some physical talents. And somebody said, "Hey, can you play something different?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do a half ogre. Thrud the Beast, half ogre. Smart, but only smart for an ogre." So I played Thrud as he had some bad things happen to him. He was a gladiator slave. And so he's like, not big on that whole enslavement thing, but he approached everybody with compassion. It was tough love, 8 intelligence, 9 wisdom compassion, but sad, pat, food, warm blanket, pick up, stick in pocket, take someplace safe.
Sometimes that's all you need is a warm blanket and some food.
Exactly. I think that would be a through line in every one of my characters, is a sense of our shared self, a sense of our shared struggles.
Going into Asher's background, you mentioned that he's had a few second chances. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Again, the universe is very unforgiving. And, when the military units have political officers who can execute soldiers for any or no reason, cowardice, blam. He's another one of these who had to have some help, who had to have a mentor, who had to have somebody in his corner who was rooting for him. So I'm going to hypothesize kind of an Uncle Iroh character who didn't let him go down a wrong path once. Maybe he was a hiver, these world-spanning cities, Coruscant. So if you can imagine being a gang member in a world hive, maybe somebody, kid, you're smart. You don't have to do this. You can go a different direction. You're better than this. Or you could be with like an effort. Might be a family thing. I'm big into family. So it might be a family thing where he had just enough of a safety net that he wasn't allowed to hit rock bottom that first time, and was able to build a soul that could survive hitting rock bottom emotionally and psychically again, built in some resilience, some grit.
Building resilience, building this kind of emotional grit sounds like something that you have some interest in as a therapeutic GM.
Any tools that help, honestly. My kiddo in his early teens, we were on a drive and we do some good convos on our drives, and he says, "Why does life suck?" Okay, I've taught for years, high school and junior high. I know every teenager says life sucks, and they're right. First time I'd ever been asked, why? Why does life suck? And we kicked it around, and the answer we came up with is because everybody can see that if everybody put in just a smidge, just an inch more effort to making this place better, it would be. If everybody did it, literally everybody, advance the species 1 inch toward peace, love, and happiness, the world would be so much better. And we don't. We don't. And that's why life sucks. And because we can see, it's like the writer, you write the story and you're like, oh, this story sucks. And your reader goes, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It's like, no, I didn't. The writer is the only one who has that platonic ideal in their head of how this could have been. The artist with the sculpture or the paint or the theatrical production or whatever. We have that perfection in our head that, of course, is unachievable, and we didn't reach it, so it sucks. But the outsiders can't see that. Well, there are no outsiders in the world. We can all perceive. We can all see that, God, life sucks. Well, if I worked a little harder, yeah, it's still going to suck because nobody else is doing it. Well, they're working a little harder. Yeah, but okay, let's try. So any tools that we can give each other any things on like radical acceptance. Nothing's going to get better unless you admit that there's a problem. Tools of how to deal with a problem. There's only a couple ways. You can try to make it better. You can reframe it, which is really powerful. You can do nothing, or you can make it worse. Those are your options. And I've been getting more and more and more lessons in reframing. So the possibilities are endless. If we can teach ourselves and each other that sometimes, Shakespeare had a few things to say about there's nothing either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. If you can reframe it, if you can look at it in a different light, it doesn't make it any better necessarily, but it might give you an avenue to approach it that doesn't make it any worse.
Asher, you're good at a lot of things. What's something you had to work hard to be good at?
I'm going to treat your question as a hypothetical, as there's no reason for you to know that information. However, my superiors at one point commended me on my ability to interrogate, to get vital information from a recalcitrant prisoner. That is a skill set that I am not particularly proud of. I understand the necessity of it, and I'm at a point where I can pass those duties on to others who might have a bit more of a taste for it. But it was difficult for me to put aside the parts of me that connect. In ancient times, there was a group known as the Spartans, and they carried sticks into battle. They would carve their name on both ends of the stick, and they would break the stick in half and drop one into a bucket and keep the other on them for ease of identification of the fallen. Before a battle, the king said, brothers, fathers, sons, husbands, farmers, us all. That's all of us. And you are good. You are good and kind and generous and loving. And I need you to leave that behind now. So when you break the twig, put all of your goodness, put every wonderful, beautiful, and gentle thing into that twig and drop it in the bucket, and take with you only murder, fire, and destruction, so that we may defeat the enemy soundly. And when you return and you join the two twigs together, you may pick that up again, and you may become whole. And then we may grieve for the enemy that we have destroyed, and pour out the libations, and pray to the gods for their ascendance to a better place. But right now I need the murderers. I think of that before some interrogation sessions, and it serves me.
Owen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for sharing your character Asher with me and my listeners.
Wonderful. And I just need to have my psychiatrist listen to this repeatedly before our next session. That would be wonderful. And save me years of time. And say, well, chapter 2. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so very, very much.
Of course. What would you like to share with my audience?
Currently, you can find me on itch.io. The company name is Four Horsemen Publishing. I've got a couple of supplements for various systems up and running there. More to follow. I'm also working, I've got a complete system that's ready for art and layout before publication called Splintered Moon. Splintered Moon is a post-apocalyptic fantasy. War in heaven, all the gods fought against all the other gods and demons and Cthulhuids and elves. So elves and orcs and dwarves and mutants and raiders and dust and clockpunk robots and basically all of the post-apocalyptic tropes and all the fantasy tropes, low magic. Lots of fun. I am available on Start Playing Games as a professional game master. Please don't take advantage of this, but I do have a soft spot in my heart for actors, artists, writers, students. So if you don't think you have a budget to hire a professional game master, you're probably wrong. But, throw a coin to your Witcher. But, if you're broke, I'll stand you to a cup of mead. You can find me on TikTok. You can find me on Discord. I will talk at length about music and movies and politics and books and games and educational resources. I ran a successful game schooling program at one of my high schools. So if you're looking for resources on how to use gaming in an educational setting, And again, all you psychologists and counselors out there, I am a therapeutic game master. I would love to work with you and your clients to get them one step up as well.
You can find me on TikTok at StarMamaC. That's StarMamaC. I'm also on Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as Characters Without Stories. I've now been podcasting for a whole year. It's been wonderful, and I'm so thankful to you, my listeners, and to all my guests for bringing their creativity to the show. I couldn't do it without you. I'm currently accepting submissions, particularly for non-D&D characters, so if you'd like to share your character, you can go to the submission form at characterswithoutstories.com. Thanks for listening, and may all your characters find their stories.